So to get a big sounding kick drum, a punchy, in your face and bottom heavy, there are a few things to consider. The first is good initial sample selection. So if you're not starting out with good quality samples, then you're starting out on the back foot. So I'm picking some drum samples out of this Vengeance house pack, and in the kicks folder, you'll find hard kicks and soft kicks. So hard kicks is going to be a good starting point. They're going to be punchy to start off with and bottom heavy. And so on and so forth. So I've created myself a track, a MIDI track. I've loaded Impulse onto it. I've just selected a couple of these kicks. I've just programmed a 4/4 kick. So it's that kick that's playing. That's the one that I like, this one here. I've added a small amount of send and return reverb to it. And now I'm going to add some compression to that kick drum to make it even more punchy. So when we've added the compression, we've made the sound tighter, punchier, less woolly, a little bit more defined. I've turned up the release time on the compressor a little bit, and what we're actually doing is losing a little bit of the low end from the kick drum. But we're going to make that up now by mixing in underneath this kick drum some sine wave. Now, sine wave is the purest waveform. This is what it looks like. The waveform does not contain any harmonic content. All you'll find in a sine wave is the fundamental frequency. So what that gives you when you mix in a really low-pitched sine wave underneath your kick drum is a really sort of fat, clear bottom end. So there's two ways that we can do this. The first way is with analog. So I've just created a track and loaded analog on. And I'll show you how I've set this up in a minute. And I've just programmed in, again, four MIDI notes, one on each beat of the bar. And it doesn't particularly matter at the moment which pitch of note they are, because I actually tune the notes on the analog device itself. So we just create a new MIDI track, drag and drop analog. So on oscillator 1 here, I'm going to change that to a sine wave. Let me just drag this MIDI clip over. Let's hear what we've got so far. We'll just turn the impulse off. So it doesn't sound much like a kick drum at the moment, but as soon as I pitch that down, then we're getting into the right sort of territory pitch-wise. What you might also need to do is just adjust the amp envelope to emulate that of a kick drum. That's perhaps still a little too high in pitch at the moment. What it's very important to do when you're mixing in a sine wave underneath a kick drum is to try and mirror the fundamental frequency of the kick drum with the analog. Otherwise, it might sound a little bit messy. So that is basically just a bit of trial and error, really. So I'm just going to play my impulse drums and mix in. Here's one I prepared earlier. Mix in this analog underneath to give me the nice bottom end that I'm looking for in this kick drum. That's maybe a little bit too much, but you get the idea. Mixing in this sine wave underneath gives you a real low end presence. What it can be quite handy to do is put a spectrum on your kick drum and a spectrum on your analog instrument, just so that the fundamental frequencies, the main frequencies, are the same for both. So if we have a look at the kick drum, around 48 Hertz is the main part of the low end of the kick drum there. So let's just try and mirror that with the analog. You see at the moment the analog is peaking at 37. So in a nutshell, the things to adjust on analog to get this to work is, first of all, making sure that you've selected a sine wave. Then you pitch it up and down using the octave control, the semitone control, and if necessary, the detune control, so that the pitch of this analog note matches the fundamental frequency of the kick drum, so that those frequencies don't clash. They work together. You'll get a nice, smooth sounding kick drum. So that's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is to actually get a sample, an audio sample of a sine wave, load it into impulse, and then pitch the sine wave in impulse. Now the difference here is that you don't have as fine a control over the pitch. You don't have that detune control like you do on analog. You just pitch it up or down in semitones, but the outcome is pretty similar. So I'm going to get hold of this sine wave, drag and drop it into impulse, and that's what that sounds like. In fact, I've already pitched this impulse slot down so that it will match the fundamental frequency of this kick drum that I'm using. So that's how it started life. I'm using the transposition rotary on impulse to pitch it down, and I'm using the decay envelope just to curtail that sample, so it's not playing for its entire duration. It's sounding a little bit more like or the envelope is a little bit more like that of a kick drum. Just pitched it down by 8 semitones, and then we can mix it in using the volume control here.